Welcome to Digital Talk Podcast, where we spotlight entrepreneurs and innovators leveraging technology related to telecoms to drive positive global impact. Today, I'm joined by my co-host Frankie Spagnolo, and in this episode, we are rejoined by Deborah Simpier, co-founder and CEO of Althea. For those of you who want to hear more about Deborah and have not done so, then please listen to our previous episode where we cover her inspirational background.
Today's episode is sponsored by IFG Consulting Europe, a leading business growth consultancy representing promising software providers selling to telecoms, enterprise and mobile markets in Europe. Go to ifgconsultingeurope.com to find out more.
We are delighted and excited to let you know about some important news related to an event we will be attending in October. Stay tuned. Welcome, Frankie. What's your highlights from the first episode?
Oh, there's so many things from the first episode with Deborah that are really interesting to me. There's much that I really found in common with her. First off, she was flying by 16. She showed horses, which is probably some sort of like, in my world, barrels and jumping. But this is brave and bold and gritty guest we have on our show with us. And I'm really excited to see how that is translated into these solutions that are active today, that we can use today, that is an industry can help move that needle forward towards the kind of future environment with our technology that we want. And I'm actually really curious. I want to understand the difference between some of their core platforms. And so without further ado, let's welcome back to our show. Deborah, welcome to Digital Talk. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much for having me. Really honored to be here and excited to share what we're building.
To start us off, can you give us and our viewers a high-level overview of how Althea technology is designed, what it does, and what your goals are at this moment?
Yeah, big question. Althea was really born out of this core premise that a lot of the friction that we see in telecom today is not due to the fact that these big providers are evil, but in fact that there's systemic problems in the way that the routing and the way that we think about how value is captured is designed. And Althea takes the premise that a open access and permissionless model and automatic billing gives a flexibility and modularity that is needed in a changing and evolving telecommunications, or potentially other utilities landscape. It's at its heart a dynamic routing infrastructure and a machine-to-machine billing that fundamentally changes how we are able to fund, build, and operate telecom and infrastructure.
Which is actually fascinating to think about in this era, as we discussed in our pre-call, of bankruptcy G, right? Right. To use, and you were actually just recently at an event in New York with the New York Fed, where they were talking about this class, and it is, I'll let you speak more about that, but share with us the importance of this moment and being able to diversify the models that are currently out there.
Yeah. And I think there's this sort of prevailing, no one says, okay, yes, our telecommunications are working great. But what we sometimes don't realize that this isn't really working great for operators either. We keep throwing money at the problem. Prior to 2020, the US spent about $100 billion in infrastructure funding, just a very small dent, where we ended up in this, we're still at this almost 1 in 4 Americans are underconnected or underserved. And many of these, you look at New York City, right? Many of these are in the heart of our cities where there is infrastructure. It's this really interesting moment where at the same time, we put a lot of money and resources into fixing these problems. We haven't really looked at the system design. but it's also at a critical moment of need. Kind of post-COVID, we really are understanding post-COVID and pre-machine economy. You think about all of the automated vehicles, the automated combines, the smart streetlights, all of these things that are imminently on the horizon, where it is pivotal that we think about, one, system design in a different way. And two, to your mentioning about the Fed, what was justifying for me after working in this environment for the past decade or so was that for the first time, we really started to see community broadband as an asset class, as its own opportunity, not as a challenge, because 1 in 4 of the market means that 25% of the market is not getting addressed. That's an opportunity.
Right. Yeah.
That's not just a challenge. So this is really how we started. Okay, how do we break this into modular building blocks? How do we build systems that align user and provider? And then this is, of course, where you see Althea platform for billing and routing and LTE 5G core really come to life. And of course, over the last 7 years, we've seen it also build in a variety of different communities across the world and have it really meet those needs, which is so exciting.
Do you think, as you were introducing the capability that you have, are you, from a operational perspective, trying to help the utilization of assets and make sure they're used more efficiently and effectively? And is it more important to find new business models for people to generate new revenue streams, or both?
It's really both. And I think the recent BDC maps, and those are the maps of where people are covered or uncovered, really highlight this kind of merging of those two critical things. Of course, being more efficient on the design, being able to utilize existing resources and have them be paid for their participation in the network. And then on the other side, having flexible pay-as-you-go model for people where they're not struggling for broadband debt. They're able to pay more flexibly, just that they would any kind of retail product. And I think if you look at, like I said, today's BDC maps where you see the coverage, anywhere in America, you see all these little green dots of connected homes, and you see the red dots of unconnected homes. But what's very interesting is that there's always 3 green dots and 1 or 2 red dots right next to each other. Yeah. It's because of the way that the systems are and the way that we value capture. We capture the user as a unit on a rental basis. And so it creates a dead end in the network. The network can't be extended beyond that green dot without building a whole new line of infrastructure. And so I think that's what's so critical, is that this design utilizes existing infrastructure and then remits the payments fractionally automatically. And then on the other side of that, it puts the user back in the driver's seat. They get to choose how they're paying as you go. And it's such a big dynamic shift.
Can you share a little bit more how it actually works in practice?
To add some kind of context and nuance to this and kind of bring it all together, is Althea is software that lives in the network infrastructure, right? So the routers in the network, your home router, that the Althea firmware and technology lives inside of that. That's the product. It's a platform.
Like an Xfinity router.
Yeah, so an Xfinity router, the company, could have an Althea router that they put in your home, because Althea is the platform, right? So think about it like Stripe for machines. So essentially, the Althea protocol in a network will let the users choose their choice of cost or performance. You got a little slider bar on your dashboard there. You choose your choice of lower cost or better performance on a minute by minute or almost second by second basis. Move that slider bar. The dynamic routing protocol routes through the network where you're based on your choices, and then remits a microtransactional payment. So that's that kind of underlying payment platform that, almost like a merchant processing or something like that the distributed payment platform allows to happen in a permissionless way. There's no one writing anything down. There's no central spreadsheet. It's a permissionless sort of way of architecting. That also means that you can bring in smart devices like the street lights or a charger into these networks too. And it's not like you're going to net 30 a smart trash can, but they can use this kind of dynamic payment platform, right, as part of this architecture.
So an important point, which, as you say, there is no authentication in your network of devices?
So the network itself is encrypted. It's encrypted locally between devices and then the devices themselves. So Althea is located at either end of the network in the end user's home and the core or the head end of the network.
Yep.
So they talk to each other about the billing protocol, and then the exit node is co-located at an internet exchange, and that is where the verification of that billing between devices happens. It really is peer-to-peer billing. Then, of course, we have that underlying under the hood blockchain component too, which is so that the billing itself is transparent to anyone. So you have that verifiable layer there.
And is this kind of like roaming agreements where everybody's making agreements and setting the prices so that whenever these sort of micro payments are, those prices are set contractually and you're just remitting based on what those inputs are?
Well, yes, that's a really good way to look at it because, of course, networks need to be coordinated and somebody needs to have a call center and answer the phone. And they're not just devices that arrange themselves, but they are coordinated things. So we have these groupings of devices, whether that's an ISP in your area or let's say a bunch of IoT, are organized under an operator. And that operator also can set a time-based fee for just maintaining the network. So maybe you have, for example, in my town, we have Clatskanie Cooperative. It's a cooperative. It's an entity that manages the network. And they receive I think it's 30 cents a day or something like that for just maintaining the routers in your ISP network. Someone answers the phone and comes and fixes things and so forth. And then the infrastructure itself is remitted in that dynamic way.
So it's quite interesting to hear how operators can interact with Althea. Can you give us a bit more insight as to how the user pays?
So if you're using an Althea router in your home, you're going to really interact with it just the same way you would with your regular ISP. That you have a payment portal and you use it in the US and we've integrated with Stripe. So you use Stripe to swipe your debit card and put $50 on your router account. And then the microtransactions are remitted in a stable coin. Typically, right now, we're either using one called XDAI or USDC. So it's a token that's denominated in dollar. So really what you're doing, you have an account that's associated with you on your actual device, just like your little router is your bank. And you have that, you go to your my.althea.net, which is your dashboard. It's associated with your phone number. And you can add funds using Stripe, just the way that you would using Stripe anything else, right? You put your debit card in there, go through the process, and then all under the hood is where all the little microtransactions and blockchain things. And of course, on your dashboard, you can keep track of spending, stuff like that. So really the idea of there's no speculative back and forth or ups and downs or anything like that. So we're abstracting away that. Now, the benefits of the transparency and programmability of blockchain we're bringing, but the idea isn't to incentivize a speculative token. The idea is to be able to have that programmability.
I wanted to ask quickly, because you just like to say blockchain, but I think blockchain in itself has features and capabilities which are obviously integral to the whole way the whole thing works. And I'm just thinking, if you look at traditional networks, let's say when you attach to a normal network, you would have, again, I talked about authentication. You said that's not really done in that way. But like a router would normally then make itself known to the core and the core would authenticate or not. Seems like we don't have that mechanism here. But the same token, when I connect using this network, it somehow must make itself known through the blockchain to other devices. Maybe you could just talk us through that aspect.
Yeah, it's similar. It's built on a mesh protocol called Babel. I don't know if you're familiar with that distance vector protocol. And so it definitely does, to your point, make itself known to the network. And of course, then pick its path through the network based on latency. Or what's interesting about Althea is that we have this price descriptor. It's the world's first price-aware routing protocol, meaning that users also select their choice of price and latency, and then the network navigates through that. But it is authenticated also at the exit of that core server where the routes are authenticated and the prices as well too. So we do have that, like to your point, where it is made known to the network. It's just a bit more dynamically than most because it's using that variant of that distance vector protocol that's going to navigate through the network based on latency. And then of course, in Althea's case, It takes price and the user's choice into account, which is pretty cool.
A first price-aware routing protocol. First time I've heard about that. Is that in any way similar to a smart contract?
So especially for the audience who might have more blockchain background, they may remember that back in 2017, when we started, this was very early Ethereum. And the idea was this idea of payment channels. So almost an escrow, you'd open up a channel between two peers and then have an escrow, and then payments would move between them and then the channel would close. But that proved to be very inefficient. So we actually radically changed the design from like 2018, and in late 2019 is really where we moved to just directly settling the payments onto the chain themselves. So they're just small transactions that just settle to the chain. But this is actually where we then evolved our idea from moving from just base Ethereum chain to something with what they call instant finality. So being able to actually have that payment settle instantly, because broadband is something, of course, you consume. So once it's moved, once it's been forwarded, you need a blockchain with instant finality, which is really where our Althea L1 became evolved, right? Because most of the blockchains that exist today are really purpose-built for finance. And that's where the majority of work in blockchain is, decentralized finance applications. And we really built Althea's L1 as a purpose-built for utilities and infrastructure, and probably the only one that's really built in that way. And it has this instant finality. And this is also where we think about scaling the infrastructure too. We can think about block configurability. We can prioritize payments and things like that, because the stack is from a very low level routing, building. The chain itself is purposely designed for this high uptime and microtransaction environment that exists in utilities and infrastructure. It evolved closely with users as we built networks and iterated on things. And so you can really see this evolution. 2021 was around, we were building our L1. We had to stop and build a blockchain bridge between two different ecosystems, the Ethereum and Cosmos ecosystem. And we wanted to build it in a decentralized, resilient way. It's called the Gravity Bridge. It's since moved $1.5 billion worth of transactions over the last 2 years or something of its existence. And it's operated by this really amazing community of different decentralized operators and validators. And of course, gave us more experience to now launch Althea L1, which is now live as of April this year.
It's so exciting. You think the blockchain is required to ensure that transparency exists forever? Or do you think that the blockchain is required because of the simplicity and the permissionless nature of allowing this to happen?
There's an intertwined, right? So the major pieces of this, as we've teased out all along, is the participation. It's the agency. It's the ability to have those choices and to protect the sovereignty of a network. And I think about, we haven't talked about them yet, but we think about building private 5G networks for farmers. A lot of their data right now is getting uploaded to a cloud. There's a lot of resilience and sustainable issues there. And so giving these tools really enables that agency and that participation while keeping networks sovereign, keeping data sovereign. And so I think that the way that we do that has to be truly neutral. It has to be truly agnostic. It has to be truly permissionless. And that is what the blockchain infrastructure does, because it's not operated by me. I can't turn on and off things. There's no central control. It's really a collaboration of many different operators that are bringing their resources together. And that's what really truly makes that resiliency and allows that agency to continue to be protected. And so I think it is so, intertwined and connected. And I think what's been so exciting about the industry.
I'm looking at the script and things like liquid infrastructure.
Yeah.
But the thing is, what I guess, as you say, you've simplified things because the interface is there. It's up to you what you connect. The interface is predefined. I work a bit in the API world or whatever, but if you like, you've built a super API because it involves the commercial monetization side, but also the connectivity piece. And you're basically saying, okay, as long as you stick to our model, you can connect, right? So I could either sit in North California with my own little network, or I could just become an extension of someone else's network, or they become, actually, it's vice versa. In fact, there is no such thing as to your point of mushy about end customers. Basically, every end customer is also a serving person, if you like, who can contribute to it.
Part of the mesh network.
Am I getting closer?
Yeah, I think that's right. And that's like this the super API, I think, is also the right direction. And that's why we use Stripe for machines. Think about what Stripe did for entrepreneurs, where they could go anywhere. Maybe you sell quilts and you set up a pop tenant, and then you had the processing, you had maybe a storefront. And that's really like that package is what we're doing for just coordinating utility and infrastructure and machine type networks and having that sort of like building blocks of being able to coordinate them. And you're right. And I think that API is the right idea to think about it.
And the privacy, because again, we're talking about everything that all sits within your all's core protocols, right? Privacy and security as traffic is being steered, right, through the various network, like you said, whether it's self-healing or it's network loading that's happening to balance resources or whatever. Can you speak to that a bit?
Yeah. So Althea is really modular and really designed to be secure from the ground up. So everything has encrypted tunnels. We use the WireGuard protocol. So everything local in that network from the head end to the user's routers is fully encrypted end to end. And then how this works is it dynamically routes to what we call an exit, which is really your core decryption protocols, and then it peers out to the rest of the internet. These are typically located in internet exchanges where you have your IP4 addresses and things like that. Then, of course, those are also permissionless to run, or you can run them in clusters. You can have failover. There's lots of different dynamic things you can do, which is where you get the really scalable nature of an Althea network. So let's say maybe you have an enterprise that has a big company, they have locations across the US, they can knit together on a dynamic basis their different interconnections to the internet exchange. It really gives them those benefits of economies of scale. And even though we talk a lot about the work we've been doing with communities, this also really gives enterprise an opportunity to get into the private LTE, private 5G network. And then this idea of what's a private network, what's a public one starts to get a little blurry.
Yeah. No, but it's true. Remember when McDonald's first, or Starbucks, depending on what your vice is, all of a sudden there was, for the first time, a place where it had this moment where I could get connected. If I had my laptop or whatever for hotspots on your phone, that network that they have, and what an enterprise like McDonald's or Starbucks, if they really wanted to be an LTE kind of connectivity player of their own.
Yeah, 100%. And I think we certainly have been working on that with a number of enterprises. And because I think what's happening right now is they're starting to think about their costs. And especially if you think about somebody that does have that nationwide presence, they're no longer locked into this idea that they must get public connectivity. And there's a lot of industry evolution happening on the eSIM platforms right now, too, that's making this even easier. I think we're going to redefine, there's a hard definition between a private network and a public one. But maybe the next time we talk again in 5 years, that won't be there anymore.
And I think this idea of, again, accountability for giving people more understanding and enterprises more control. It breaks down monopolistic barriers. It allows for affordability. Like, it really has a lot of impacts throughout all the layers of what we're building. So it's fascinating.
I mean, I can see the potential here for enterprises. So if I was an enterprise, how would I actually go about buying Althea?
Althea is an open source protocol of routing and billing and a layer 1 blockchain that is operated by a decentralized and permissionless group of operators and stakeholders. So the core platform is, yes, to Frankie's point, unbuyable. And you can buy the tokens and you can participate as a validator. There's other ways to have stakeholdership in that network, but it belongs to no one person or is locked by any one entity or person, which is a key core fundamental. And then the pieces on top, the portals, like we've built an NMS, a network monitoring system we call operator tools. Now that is Hawk Networks, and that's partially closed source. And that's something we can license or people can use or whatever. They can buy that piece of it. but anyone could build their own NMS with these metering and billing solutions. And so that's what I think is so exciting, is that there's so much opportunity, just like very much like Linux, right? Where anybody, and this is why you see the prevalence of Linux in everything, everywhere, and people utilize it. And then sometimes they're gonna call up a system integrator, they're gonna call up someone to help build their own bespoke front ends and so forth. And that's where our company can come into play and certainly help with those sorts of things. But the platform is a platform and an ecosystem, and it's the coordination of many different people, which is it's been an amazing vision and amazing to see it come to life.
Yeah, it really does sound amazing. Creating a platform seems to be a key enabler for the membership. So how are members actually using Althea in practice?
There's a couple of pieces I wanted to tease out of this question here. And so one is that if we think about Althea, it's like a Linux-like platform. It's an ecosystem. It's permissionless to utilize the platform, whether you're Comcast or whether you're a local provider like Proximate Co-op. And so in terms of the metering and billing, we certainly have examples of what our company at Hawk Networks has been doing, and other companies like Wave 7 is another example of someone using the Althea protocol. And then it's set up using a broadband ISP. And so the router firmware, that's if you go to the Althea GitHub, you can download the firmware and put it on your home router. It's cool. We actually also made an LTE 5G core that is so flexible that you can go to Best Buy or Amazon, buy an $80 home router and run a 5G core on your home router, which is
amazing.
I think yes, it's a segue there. But the idea is that this platform is metering and billing. It's agnostic to how it's actually used. Certainly another company could come along and use the same metering and billing for energy, for example, or really anything that can be metered and billed, which is why on the grand kind of vision, we talk about this as transforming infrastructure and utilities. However, to date, it's really been focused on the telecom industry and really this idea of a broadband network.
So it's really good to see how versatile this is, and it can be used also outside of telco. That I do find interesting. So how do you capture and enable payment versus the legacy approach?
There's two kind of main core components of that. So one is that the blockchain allows us to have the transparency and permissionless aspects that you won't find in utilizing sort of legacy types of payment system. The way that they are going to value capture is they're going to have to license it and so forth. And then it becomes a very much permissioned process. So this is not that. So the platform itself is open and agnostic. And this is really agnostic protocols and neutral protocols is really how we got things like TCP/IP and how we evolved the internet, because it really was not a competitive landscape. It was a collaborative one. And so we really believe there's so much power in the unlocking of open source and transparent protocols, neutral protocols like this. So that's a big part of it. The other piece is that because the world is becoming so global, we haven't really talked too much about liquid infrastructure, which is the kind of capital piece of this, is capital going into networks. But this allows people to be involved with funding and coordinating infrastructure and networks anywhere in the world, being able to then have that kind of flexibility of payments, and then so that you could fund a project with USDC somewhere else and then get paid back into USDC currency as well. So there's that flexibility of payment on a global scale, which I think is quite fascinating as well. As again, if we're moving into a machine economy, then machines aren't necessarily going to be constrained by borders.
You said because one of the beauties of the system is it can be deployed internationally because of the way it can be done. Have you considered how different countries and tax authorities might view that? The reason why I mention that is you maybe know, I don't know to what extent you're involved in the MVNO world, but there is a relatively prominent European MVNO where certain tax authorities have not taken kindly to the way the MVNO was publishing or paying or not paying tax, without trying to get myself into too much deep water here. And of course, because each country, that's where licensing comes from, right? At the end of the day, every country wants a slice of the cake and they want to be paid where things are consumed. In a way, just curious, what's your comment on that and how that could be dealt with?
I think our system actually ameliorates that problem because it is transparent and flexible. We can really actually build the tax directly into the payment system. And it gives also the transparency to know where those infrastructure assets are. So many of these countries, you go in somewhere and you see the big mass of fiber optic cables and some guy in a little ladder or shovel goes and builds some more infrastructure. These countries don't know where their infrastructure is and they're not able to capture the taxes. So one thing that's really great about having that network is we can actually go, okay, anything built here is going to have a tax off the top. And then where the infrastructure is, how much revenue is generating and you're taking your cut right off day one.
I love it. In fact, we're finding a lot of challenges in big industry milestones like connected cars around the borders. What's happening with eSIM? What's the protocol? It's always been, it's why Europe went to the digital single market. Like those things, as far as connectivity enables, going back to what we spoke about in our first episode, is this access, and it is borderless, and it is all of ours, and both ours to consume and our responsibility to participate in. But going back to that core network and the micropayments, so at the end, who is your customer? And who's like your customer? Who's your partner? And where in the value chain do you sit?
So, and when we say you, I would probably say us as
Althea.
Hawk Networks, the company. Yeah. Just because it can be confusing, right? And just to clarify, so Hawk Networks is our C Corp, think Red Hat and Linux. We help support people building on the Althea platform. But the Althea platform is utilized by people building infrastructure and networks. So we are the facilitator in another business who is, whether that's a nonprofit or a for-profit or however or existing ISPs. Typically, we're really filling that market need. To the earlier part of the conversation, there was a 25% addressable market that the legacy systems were really having a hard time addressing. So I think it's really compelling to, on the one side, say, we can meet the challenges to providing access in a flexible way for users. And then on the other side, say to a provider, look, you have now 25% more addressable market. And that's really powerful. That's a really, I think, powerful fabric to build upon. And I think that's what's been so exciting.
And that certainly goes and speaks around the value of your sort of core network in something the size of a home router. You spoke about a project that you were doing in Ghana. Can you share a little bit about that, the practical nature of what that looks like? And is that core network component a piece of that?
Yeah, there's a pretty small network at this point, but really, you do see that kind of same underlying core customer component where someone says, "I want to, meet a challenge in my area. I want to have tool sets that are easy for me to build with." And reached out to us and started building with the Althea technology. And because that payments were flexible, it really worked for a broader set of folks. And then it also worked on the other level for funding the networking and building it. It's much easier on the blockchain side of things. So you do get more of the bigger global perspective. But we've built in across 4 countries, primarily in the US. We've built in or helped other folks build in about 13 US states right now.
And how long does that, when you start a new project, what does that look like? Is it fast and easy to deploy? Is that part of destroying the legacy models?
Each project is a little bit different. And I think where I would say one of the bigger disruptions about the Althea model is it's sustainable. So we see a lot of times, even in my community, where prior to 2020, grants after grant, there's 1,500 people that live here. It's not a very big area, but they would receive $1 million grant. Somebody would come in and build. Maybe they build quickly, maybe they build slowly. But because they use this legacy system, they just aggregated, sold the biggest parts of it off to someone else. And then a couple of years later, same sort of people wanted to serve, and so on and so forth. So what's exciting to me about building, instead of building for communities, we build with communities. You bring in all these really amazing principles around design thinking and building, taking the time to say, what are we trying to build, listening to the community, empathizing, ideating together, and then iterating on the process. And although that may not shorten the time frame to build, what you're building is a long-lasting, resilient network. And I think that is so exciting.
And I do think, like you said about sustainability, this idea, and my question definitely positioned a benefit in speed. And I think that's one of the things I philosophically sit on the other side of that our industry needs to do is slow down. And like you said, think about what is it we're trying to build? Who is it we're building for? We know that it has to be to this group of people. And that's, I think that's really fantastic way to think of it and a fantastic way to be deploying technology with communities.
One more quick anecdote on that. This really cool one in Northern California, rural community. AT&T was not making money with their copper network there, just shut off the DSL network, so no more, and because it wasn't sustainable for them. But so the community came together and they brought in fiber backhaul. They built a wireless network up, and it's using this dynamic protocol, so it's self-healing. Several different people run different fiber interconnections. So this is back in 2020, end of 2020, right in the height of COVID. AT cuts the internet off. The community comes together. They built this network with around $10,000. But because it was this community collaboration, this is now a network that's been using the protocol, running sustainably, serving the needs of the community for 4 years. Initial capital, $10K,
right.
They built it in a few months.
A network.
Yeah, and it's just so exciting.
Can you just talk us through the example you just said, the guys in North California community build? The subscriber, they have to pay, obviously, each of the end users, right? Is that correct?
Yeah, with Althea, end users a little bit more mushy of a term, right? Because there's no dead ends. And that person who is having an Althea router in their home can be both. So if the traffic is flowing through them because their infrastructure in the network, they're going to get paid. If they're using traffic and being part of the system, they're going to pay out, because those microtransactions, it's a constant flow. This device, this little bank that's in your router is actually going to be making 10, 20 little microtransactions a day, maybe.
What about in moments, because I often think about the network in its highest moments of crisis. So force majeures, real moments like when the hurricane hit New York, when the hurricanes hit Puerto Rico, and Google tried to deploy their balloons. And there's all of these in crisis sort of Band-Aids that we've seen. Are you guys thinking at Althea about those kind of in crisis deployments?
Yeah, we've done a lot of off-grid work, both for enterprise who wanted to utilize, or things like farmers who want to utilize a really lightweight off-grid instance way out in eastern ranching country, Oregon, on tops of mountains and off-grids. And so we've done a lot of those, building kind of resilient infrastructures. But I think the core point is the flexibility of the software, because if you think you can put a 5G core on your home router, and no matter what happens, we can come in, rebuild, utilize the infrastructure that's left. Maybe the cell tower still has those radios on there. And then one of the cooler evolutions of Althea is, of course, we're moving into eSIMs. Right? So being able to then have that flexibility, just use your SIM on your phone and build up in any kind of crisis, I think really speaks to the sovereignty and resiliency of an Althea network.
And I think it really pushes on those points in those in crisis moments. Like you said, that resiliency is so just absolutely important. And to speak about the sustainability with tech and there's social impacts on everything, the UN has obviously set out for us as a planet, as a society, these goals. And the telco industry, for one, and the GSMA and other governing bodies really try to ascribe to them. From the UN sustainability goals, are there any that Althea is really tackling specifically?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think what we've really teased out across all of this core conversation is the flexibility of the model and being able to utilize existing resources more efficiently. And this is really where, as we think about energy grids and their kind of breakdown, and where we think about how that's going to go, right? Basically having opportunities for more dynamic energy grids takes connectivity, takes lots of different resources, and Althea's key components of the flexibility of a software model. We've seen them already work very well for us in terms of supply line crunch. We're not hardware based. There's not any particular type of hardware. And the efficiency of the Althea model on hardware is, I think, a key component to the sustainability of the system for the UN and, of course, just universally. Also for under-resourced communities who may not have the means to get the latest and greatest technology.
Coming back to the sustainability side, Are you able to then do carbon capture, i.e. to know how much energy a device is using and therefore its emissions and CO2 equivalents, etc.? Because that's a tax, if you like, equivalent. It's a counter as well in that sense.
Yeah, exactly. Like you said, it's a counter, it's metering. So anything that can be metered and billed, there might be some API or dev lift to integrating it into whatever platform. Like I said, we've been using it primarily in the broadband sense, but it's not a huge lift. And I think that's what's cool.
Yeah, I think that's the philosophy, behind ORAN as well, is that the more agnostic all of this is, the more scalable it is and the more available it is to everybody. Was there a partner or somebody else that you would like to give a shout out who are really key to helping create the sustainable, resilient, transparent environment you're working to build?
Yeah, I would say that along the road here, we've met many great organizations. Specific shout out to Connect Humanity, who I think really understands not only how to looking at helping communities figure out solutions to their connectivity challenges, but also they're really thinking about how those financial models need to evolve. And it's been really exciting to see how their vision is coming to life and really being transformative on more than just a network by network basis. So shout out to the folks at Connect Humanity for the good work that they're doing.
Now that you've launched it in April, what are the first sort of feedback and successes that you're seeing through that? Now that it's out there, where are you seeing it moving to and what's the feedback?
So it's still in its integration phase, integrating and the different bridging infrastructure and things like that too. But what's been exciting to me is even during this sort of early stages, the ecosystem to that point about that neutral and agnostic platform, people looking, hey, we want to come and build applications and different smart contracts on top of it. A lot of it is actually in the energy sector. What if we took chargers and built them? Or what if we use this kind of liquid infrastructure platform where it's the funding piece of it to build data centers or build this or that? And so we have a lot of existing enterprise that are looking to interact or existing blockchain projects with the kind of purpose-built infrastructure in Althea L1. So that's what's been so exciting so far, is that we get to see this evolve to really a robust ecosystem.
So if someone wanted to get involved with this, would they go to GitHub or somewhere, or because it's software, right? So fundamentally, I presume they can download it somewhere and start playing with it, let's say.
Yeah, absolutely. GitHub. We have a really robust community in the Discord server where you can find other people that are building. You can find devs that have been building on that for quite some time now. So that's a great place to get started on that conversation to learn more. docs.althea.net is a good place to really dive into how components work or how you can build using it. But yeah, we would love to welcome anyone to the community and support their vision.
And on a broader note, to the telco providers, to some of our listeners, what do you need from them? What's the call to action right now?
That there's opportunity. I think to my point earlier, there's 25% of an addressable market that is accessible simply by changing how we interact with the payment models. The flexibility of payment is key to being able to evolve. And I think we'd be happy to help them integrate these flexible systems into their existing payment infrastructure and allow more people to access the system and provide more sustainable models as well for them.
So in 10 years' time, what percentage would you say of the connectivity are you covering now worldwide? And what do you see the potential going forward? And do you see also, given the geopolitical challenges we have today, is there any reason why it couldn't be used globally?
Yeah, I think that definitely. I think that each country will probably try to put some gating around the UI to it, just like that we see with the Ethereum or Bitcoin are also very similar. They're global networks. Many different countries utilize them, but some jurisdictions have, regulation on how people interact with these blockchains, of course. And I'm sure that we'll see that kind of thing occur. But there's no real reason why the platform can't, of course, exist across many different things. And we do hope it becomes like a standard. The way that we do think now about TCP/IP, and it really just belongs to everyone, despite having a few problems. But we hope that the Althea is seen like that too. We'd love to work with IEEE and ITU and to really think about how we standardize these in the UN and things like that. How do we standardize these protocols so that they are, accessible and neutral and they stay those ways? And then we have a very small footprint right now, but we really just got to the point where we're starting to exist as an ecosystem. So I hope I think we're on a trajectory to have really exponential growth. And it's really the right time as the industry is evolving.
It was really wonderful to speak with you today. I am going to be watching with great interest to see how everything develops. It really is fundamental to how, think about it, if we're in the apocalypse and we don't have any control over connectivity in our own sense as individuals at a community level, we're just out. We're done. Are you going to go build the whole thing again? No, but if part of it exists right there in your neighborhood, Mr. Rogers would be proud.
Yeah. And that's where we also get the choice. If you want to have choice and freedom and governance over how you interact with infrastructure, it's about taking back that sovereignty and resilience as well.
Yeah.
So it's been a great conversation, Deborah, and thank you for taking the time to speak to us and sharing your story. And Althea, we hopefully know a little bit more about it, but to be honest, in my mind, it also a lot of questions, raise a lot of questions in my mind, but hopefully in a good way of wanting to know more. And hopefully that's the same for our audience. Again, thank you for doing your bit for the communities and trying to make the planet more habitable and more sustainable, which is what we're all about.
And to our listeners out there, if you want to know more about Deborah, take a listen to last week's episode where you can find out a whole bunch of fascinating things leading to her to become the person that she is today, like flying planes and ham radios. So it's been a fascinating conversation. Thank you so much for being our guest. And till next time.
You made the conversation easy and very much enjoyed sharing what we're working on. And I think the future is bright if we have great folks like yourselves helping to make that possible. Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for taking the time to listen to our new podcast. If you have any feedback or know of any stories to be told involving digital technology and telecoms doing good, then please do let us know via our email, getinTouch@digiteltalk.com. Also, feel free to send us a message on LinkedIn. It'd be great to hear from you. We're excited to share that we are partnering with Network X, one of the leading telecoms events in Europe, the crossroads of digital, fixed and mobile communications, taking place in Paris between the 8th and 10th of October. Digital Talk will be there to interview some of the most promising contributors to sustainability and tech for good. Don't miss out and book your pass to be inspired, connect and network. Hope to see you there.
Before we go, if you've enjoyed today's episode and would like to support the podcast, then don't forget to give us a follow and hit the notification bell so you never miss an episode. Also, if you'd like to leave us a review or share it with your colleagues, it really helps us on the channel. Thanks so much for being a part of our audience today, and hopefully you'll join us next time.
That's all we've got time for, so it's goodbye from me.
And that's goodbye from him.
Bye
for now.